Abani sanibonani? Ninjani? Siyabonga ngiphuma eGoli namhlanje so bengifuna ukubona kahle ukuthi sengibuyele kwaZulu so ngiyabingelela igama lami uSiphamandla Mhloko, Senior Programs Officer khona la ekhaya DDP, and I will be sort of program directing / facilitating today's engagement. What I would like to plead and ask for, because siyavela kumabonakude on the other side with Facebook and stuff, can we try and fill up these front tables? I know that Oavin complained that there's no, we didn't make extension cords available for him in the front, so he can stay in the back alone. But if other comrades can please move to the front, where possible. Whilst we have our people move to the front, I would just like to unofficially welcome you, because it's not necessarily my job. The executive director will come just now, but to sort of lay the groundwork for the sort of conversation we're hoping today. Much more interactive, much more engaging in terms of what are the things that we're observing or that we're engaging with as civil society organizations. Some of us who have observed elections, some of us who are interested in observing elections, some of us who participated as candidates in elections, in terms of the work that needs to be happening outside of the electoral cycle. So when we talk about the electoral cycle, it's a complete cycle. So during election day or the election itself, what is the work that we need to be doing to ensure that civic education is happening, at least with quality and to the extent that will try and at least mobilize citizens towards participating and turning out at the polls. We recognize that there are a variety of issues that people are engaged with, that they might be facing a community level. There are a variety of reasons young people themselves feel that they don't feel that the current electoral system represents their interests. The gaps in accountability and transparency are significant factors to consider when we talk about civic education and the low voter turnout in particular. So we want to understand and at least get to a point where we engage around these different issues. And for us in this room, we are very privileged in the sense that we have access to these conversations based on the constituencies that we are part of, based on the organizations that we are also a part of, but also that we have the ability to come and also learn from other individuals, such as your Prof. Ngomenzulu, your Prof. Anton Harbers, who have a wealth of knowledge based on the amount of work that they've been able to do in the various spaces that they occupy. And so for them to at least impart some of the knowledge upon us, but also for us to engage them directly, even if just because some Prof. Ngomenzulu na degree of 5 or 16 or however many degrees he has, doesn't mean his views also can't be engaged with and challenged. And I think he enjoys that. And I hope that when we get to engaging with his presentation and engaging with the different presentations that we're having today as well, that we are willing to be a part of that conversation. I will ask that we put our phones on vibrate. I know that we can't put them off completely. There are a number of things that we're also dealing with, and I recognize that you left very important matters behind in order to be able to be a part of this space, and we want to say we're very grateful for your continued support in that regard. We convene today's engagement also with a multitude of partners, and those partners will be reflected both in the program, but also we will also be just naming them as time goes on. But of course, before I go too far with things and pretend as though a young program, party, Dr. Paul Kariuki to do the official welcome on behalf of the organization. That's actually since we go to motor nje Paul we passed in his second life, so it's important that we honor that part of his life as well. Can you give him another round of applause?
We're on. Okay. Well, thank you so much, colleagues, for coming this morning. Really do appreciate on behalf of our team for making the time, and of course our guests, Professor Ngomenzulu and Professor Anton Harbers, and the others that are going to join us later. And all of you, associates, members from the media, and you civil society partners who have always supported the work of DDP. I'm very grateful that we are convening this conference at a time when our country is facing quite a few challenges that require that we step up our our appreciation of the role of civic education in holding those who are in leadership accountable. And a lot has been said over the years, and of course we've been part of those conversations on how do we enhance our civic education delivery and how we position it so that we can be able to fulfill the mandate we have as civil society, a vibrant network of organizations that are able to start up some level of pressure that ensures that our leaders do know that we are watching what they are doing. But as you can know, and you probably have had these conversations at different spaces, it's requiring us now to step up in the way we actually offer civic education. Of course, it begins by conscientizing ourselves about the law. How can we use the law to really advocate for better services, and how can we use the law to ensure that those who are found wanting will not miss the day of accountability. And that means that we as an organization, together with you as our partners, have to really work more, maybe even twice as hard as we've done, because not everybody knows how to apply these different tools to really ensure that we have a meaningful advocacy effort that really wants to deliver change that we desire to see. And so I believe that by your attendance here today is an expression of an interest and a desire that you want to make sure that you have a role to play that you're already doing now, either as an individual or part of an organization or part of a network. But at the same time also to say that our efforts together are the ones that are going to bring the meaningful change that we want to see. And if we do not do, who will do it? And so there is that sense of urgency, even for us as an organization, to ensure that we are focusing our resources. And probably if you've been following our work so far from the beginning of the year, you've seen we have really tried to do much more than we used to do, taking this work in spaces that probably we never had to go before. But we're also thankful for our partners like IEC, Independent Electoral Commission in our province, that really has come on board as a partner in opening the doors, that we have been able to reach out communities that we could not have been able to reach before. And that strategy will continue for as long as we are able to do that work, because we want to make sure that everybody has a fair chance. Every citizen has a fair chance to make their voice known, but not just to make their voice known, but make an informed voice. Yeah? And so we're counting on you as our partners in this journey. And it requires us to do a little bit more than what we've been doing. But at the same time also, we have our eyes focused on the upcoming elections in 2024. And so all our efforts are geared towards preparing the citizenry towards that civil responsibility, so that we can do better than we have ever done before. And so on behalf of my team that has really worked very hard to put this conference together, on behalf of our speakers, our DDP board, and our funder, I would like to encourage you to enjoy our hospitality, engage, network, and more importantly, learn as much as you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul Kayuki, for that introduction. We have with us, but because we have other important speakers, we don't want to put him on a pedestal above others. All of us are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. So I'd like to welcome Prof. Gomezulu, who will be doing a bit of an introduction for us insofar as the subject matter that we're going to talk about. So as it concerns civic education, there are a number of factors that we need to consider about what sort of outcomes themselves we're trying to look at. And so he's going to be speaking to us about helping us understand what characterizes low voter turnout. What are some of the causes, at least from his perspective, that he's found that have contributed to the low voter turnout. So Prof. Ngomezulu, I'll speak on his bio briefly. Prof. Ngomezulu was born and bred at Esovane, and under Ingwavuma in the far northern Natal. He's a full professor in political science and international relations at the University of the Western Cape. He decided to abandon the UKZN and went to Western Cape, but it's important that we must pursue our, izinto zethu ezijulile. Uma ukuthi la awuphathiwe kahle, njengothanda ngithi So, Prof. Ngomezulu holds 7 academic degrees in politics, history and education, plus a senior secondary teacher's diploma. These degrees include a Bachelor of Education, 2 honors degrees, 1 in history and 1 in political science, 3 masters, 2 in history and 1 in political science, as well as, hey, you guys are just like one day, but not 3. So he has 3 masters, 2 in history and 1 in political science, as well as a doctorate in philosophy. The doctorate in philosophy though is in African political history. Prof, and thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. You can come to the front. We have a clicker available to you as well. No, nothing present. Okay. That's Michelle is under Prof. DSTV esikhokhelayo nyanga nenyanga siyambona nje ngeyikhathi yabo asili 7 p.m. noma 7:30 umbona, but he's been very frequenting a lot of the analysis specifically related to some of the political movements that have been happening in this country. So we're very happy that he was able to afford us his time being with us today.
And I'm God. Okay. So then, if you believe him, then it's fine. I'll be looking at my presentation from here, and then for the benefit of the colleagues, then someone can just show it there. Maybe while they do that, colleagues, I must say that I'm relieved on 2 fronts. One, I'm happy to have left Cape Town. It was terribly cold. At one point, I put my shirt on the chair and then went to do something. When I came back, it was as if it was in the fridge. It was so terrible. At least I can move around without a jacket or a jersey. So that is one relief. But then the second relief is what has been happening over the weekend with the ANC policy conference. It was terrible. I found myself, as Njoman was saying, but then some things have to be said, by the way. That is the only way you can save this country. Yeah. Because those of you who have a chance to go to church will know that the truth will set us free. Don't be worried. If you worry, I once said to someone that I cannot buy my life. I would rather die soon than dying for the truth. So those are some of the things, but there's a discussion for another day. And the other topic which is understanding law voter turnout, the role of civil society and electoral management bodies in improving civic education towards a more participatory democracy. You can skip page 2 where I just list the topics that I'll be talking to, and then go straight to my introductory remarks. I start off by saying that the dawn of democracy in 1994 ushered in a new phase in South Africa's political history. We know what happened in 1994 when we voted for the first time. So for the first time, the black majority had the opportunity to vote for parties of their choice. As colleagues will recall that there was this thing called the tricameral parliament in 1983, where the apartheid government realized that they had made a big mistake of leaving out the majority of South Africans outside of the political realm. And then they tried to meet us halfway, but they said, no, we can't accommodate all of them at the same time. Then they said, let us have a tricameral parliament. We'll still be at the top as whites. We are better than everybody else, but then we'll accommodate some colors, we'll accommodate some Indians, and then we'll have the House of Delegates and all the like. So they were trying to basically find a way as to what it would mean to bring on board the majority of South Africans. Then, of course, come 1994 with the new political dispensation. So for the very first time in 1994, then we had a choice to decide which party to vote for. I can't remember whether there were 14 political parties and now we have about over 500 that are registered, and with 325 contesting the election next year. I don't know what's going to happen in 2024. Because Tom, Dick, and Harry wants to lead. Nobody wants to be there. I don't know what has gone wrong. But anyway, I'm not there. So noticeably, the euphoria of the 1980s has dwindled over the years, and yet the number of political parties and independent candidates has increased exponentially. This is an irony, because ordinarily, you would expect that having started in 1994, then this euphoria should have been sustained. This ecstasy, where people are enthusiastic about election, is supposed to have been sustained. But unfortunately, the opposite is true. Meaning independent candidates. So there are so many of them. And then the main question we need to be asking ourselves, what has gone wrong? What is the problem here? That is basically what this discussion is all about. And part of the answer is already implicit in the topic that I just read out, which is basically saying that there is lack of civic education, whereby people don't seem to understand what participatory democracy is all about, why they should participate, and why they should vote for certain political parties and not others, and so on and so forth. But most importantly, there is also a failure by politicians to deliver on their promises. If you are a politician and then you promise people that you are going to build 5 roads, and then at the term of your office you have not, in fact, built even 1 kilometer, it means there is something wrong with you. And then don't expect us to vote for you next time. We'll vote you out because you didn't deliver on your mandate. So one of the reasons then why people are now reluctant to vote, when we go around asking people, either in the research projects that we do, we ask people, are you going to vote? They say, no, it's pointless. Why do we say it's pointless? We voted for X, and then X did not deliver. We voted for Y did not deliver. Why should we go for Z? Because it's almost a foregone conclusion that they are going to tell us the same lies. So basically, politicians are to blame for voter apathy, where people don't vote. They said it's pointless because we're not getting the services that we deserve. In 2021, I wrote a piece which was entitled Disbandment of Civic Organizations Hampers Service Delivery. And in that piece, which I did for Independent Online, the main point that I highlighted there was that the disbandment of civic organizations left a void, because up to the 1990s, when they were active, they were able to educate society. So the moment you stopped them, then it meant that you closed a door, and then people then were left with no one to assist them in terms of understanding what their role is and what their responsibilities are. So therefore, I'm happy that DDP and all the other partners have invited me to talk to this particular issue. Maybe let's start with the constitutional imperatives, because that is the guiding principle that we all have to follow. Now, when we come to this one, I start off by saying that the Electoral Commission Act, number 51 of 1996, together with the Electoral Act number 73 of 1998, laid down the road that needs to be followed during an election. In other words, they indicate to us what needs to happen. Then, of course, we have Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which basically talks about the Bill of Rights, meaning that you and I, as citizens, we have a right to vote, and we have a right to decide which party to vote for or which independent candidate to vote for. Specifically, Section 19 of the Constitution makes reference to the right to form a political party. In other words, all of us have a right to form political parties, even if we don't know why we are forming them. And then, of course, we have a right to participate in those activities of recruiting people to join our political parties. And then, of course, we also have a right to campaign for those political parties. I remember once there was someone who said, I'm joining this election race not to be a second, to play a second fiddle. I'm joining this race because I want to win. And when that person didn't win, I'm not going to say the name, we'll figure out. When that person did not win, and then he was so angry, he said, no, there is something wrong with this calculation. I know, for example, I have so many party agents, counted about 50. I have about 50 party agents, so already I should have 50. And then he counted his family members. I have so many family members. And the figure I'm seeing there is nowhere close to that. So something is terrible. I don't know what Dr. Shawana, they can assist in explaining what went wrong there. Okay, but the reality of the matter is that the Constitution gives us the right to form political parties. So there is nothing wrong in forming a political party. There is a statement I made a couple of weeks ago when I said that our leaders, including our president, I don't know where they get it from. The reality of the matter is there are things that are constitutionally and legally correct, and yet politically they don't make any sense. There is a difference there. You are legally correct, constitutionally are correct, but then politically the decisions you make don't make sense. So you can figure out again how when there's something then they can show even if it is constitutionally correct, but does it make sense politically? If it doesn't, then of course you must abandon it. Then section 19, subsection 3A and B states the following, that every other citizen has the right to do the following. One, to vote in elections for any legislative body established in terms of the Constitution, and do so in secret. That's why we say your vote is secret, although others of course would say we vote and then they'll take a picture and then they'll send it to their bosses so that money can trickle in. Okay, yeah, you voted for me, so I can give you that money. That is something else. The reality of the matter is the Constitution allows us to decide who to vote for, and then of course to stand for public office, and if elected, to then hold office. Because we don't elect ourselves. That is a statement I made in one of my 15 interviews I did yesterday, saying that the new leader of the ANC, the chairperson of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, did something very good, and they made good statements, pressing the correct buttons. But I said I'm a bit concerned because he didn't elect himself. He was elected by people. They might put pressure on him, and then it might lead to him derailing some of the things that he has promised. But as a person, I was impressed, 100% impressed in the manner in which he handled certain things. So therefore, participatory democracy is not thumbsucked, but it is enshrined in our Constitution. So whenever we talk about this participatory democracy, we are not just going to bed, waking up tomorrow and then talk about it. It is because it is enshrined in the Constitution. Now, these figures, that is the next slide. These figures are not necessarily exact figures because the IEC would give you the correct figures. I was just doing a random check as to how we have performed since 1994 in the national government election, and then of course in the local government election. I'm not going to go through all of this, but there is something very interesting. If you look at the last figure on either color, either on the national side or on the local government side, the figure has gone down. Which basically means that there is something amiss, there is something that we are not doing right. If we started at 86% in for the national government election, and then we ended up at 66%, there is something wrong there. And then on the local government side, we started 48, of course, and then some would say, yeah, we tried 2011, 2016, but the reality of the matter is 2011, we didn't do well. Now the question is, why is this the case? Except for the reasons I've just pointed out, that we have so many political parties and so many individuals. If anything, in fact, the numbers should be going up, because it means that we have new players on the field, and then of course we should be having so many people supporting our political parties and our independent candidates. Unfortunately, that is not the case. So it means there is something terribly wrong that we need to correct as a nation and not as individuals. Which then takes me straight to the thrust of my presentation here, the role of civil society and electoral management bodies in improving civic education. Let's start by conceptualizing this civic education. I'm not going to dwell much on this, but I felt it is important so to all read from the same script. Some will tell you that this refers to the provision of information, right? Because you need information for you to make an informed decision. So the provision of information and learning experiences. We learn from others who have more experience than we do, and then we learn from them, so that we can equip and empower citizens to participate in a democratic process. I mean, if I've not voted before, I will rely on those who have voted for them to let me know what the process entails, how it goes about and all of that. And basically, why should I vote for X and not for Y? So that is basically the context within which this particular concept is understood. Some argue that civic education historically has focused primarily on preparing students to influence politics and government policy. In other words, from a historical perspective, civic education was meant for youngsters on the understanding that they had no clue how politics works and then how democratic processes operate. So then we had to capacitate them so that they would be better informed and then be in a position to then make an informed decision. So initially that was the idea. Of course, things have changed because we have realized that even elderly people, some of them are clueless as to why they vote and then why they don't vote. They just decide, no, because my friend is not voting, then I'm not voting. Or because my friend is voting for so and so, I'm going to vote for that person. The person has nothing to offer, but just because your friend is voting, you're also voting. So that means that this civic education then should not be meant for the youngsters. All of us need it so that we can make informed decisions. So this meant that civic education then was used historically as a mechanism to improve the current situation first and also to build for the future. So we want people to be better informed now, and then we also want them to prepare for the future. Civic education may be seen as an answer to the question of how to educate the young citizens of the state. In other words, if we understand that youngsters need to be brought at a particular level, then we use civic education to bring them on board so that they can be on par with us as the adults, assuming that, of course, we know what we're doing. However, this should not be misconstrued or misunderstood to mean that civic education is only meant for the youth. Adults too need it. Here I just mentioned some aspects or types of this civic education, and then they are presented in different ways. Some would say there are 4 aspects or there are 4 types, and then others summarize that into 2. And the difference is very simple. If you look at the first one, it says political knowledge. In other words, we want people to be knowledgeable politically so they can make informed decisions, but also want them to understand the values that they should embrace whenever they look for a particular candidate. They should identify certain values in that candidate and then vote for that person. Then the last 2, some separate them, which is why they come up with 4, but others condense them into 3. So then we have knowledge on the person, and then we have values as the second one, and then we have behavior. That behavior can be confined to an individual, or it can be expanded to a community. So that is basically from a theoretical understanding of this concept. Now let's look at the goals of civic education. Why do we need it? Among those goals, I've listed a few. One is to assist young people acquire and learn to use skills, knowledge, and attitudes that will prepare them to be competent and responsible citizens throughout their lives. So you prepare them for the future. So you're assuming that they don't have certain skills and knowledge, and then you capacitate them so that they can then prepare themselves for the future. Number 2, you capacitate young and old. That is why I'm saying that this should not be confined to youngsters only. So you capacitate you young and old about their constitutional rights, the ones we referred to at the beginning, by saying that you don't just go to bed, wake up tomorrow, and then talk about these issues, but you have to constantly refer to the Constitution. Then you capacitate them. And then, of course, to make them conscious of their voting power. You know, as the citizenry or as the electorate, we have power, but not all of us are aware of the power that we have. For instance, whenever a particular candidate wants you to vote for them, and then I vote for them, you vote for them, and they don't deliver, you have the power and not to re-elect that person next time. So that is the power that you and I have. But unfortunately, not everyone is aware of the power. All people think of, they say if Councillor X did not deliver, then I'm not voting in the next election. I once wrote in my Isolezo column, I once wrote that if you don't vote, technically you have voted. The only difference is that you voted for the person you don't like. So simple. Because if you don't vote for me, there are people who are going to vote for me. If I was going to get a wrong percentage, I'm going to get a higher percentage because you didn't vote. So not voting is basically not an option. Because by not voting, you have voted, but it's just that you voted for the wrong person. To ensure that the adult population understand the roles and responsibilities in the consolidation of participatory democracy and in ensuring that service delivery happens. So in other words, the reason why we give this civic education as a collective is to ensure that the people who work with have a clear understanding of what they are doing, and they also have to understand not just their roles, but also their responsibilities. The Constitution spells out that as much as we have rights, as enshrined in Chapter 2 of the Constitution, but we also have responsibilities. So you and I have a responsibility to make sure that participatory democracy thrives. It can only thrive if all of us play our role. And then, of course, to ensure that voters understand the value of voting and the disadvantage of not voting. Because if they don't understand the difference, they will just make a decision which is ill-informed. And only later will they realize that they made a mistake, and by then it will be too late to correct the situation. Because if you didn't vote for the right person, and then people vote for the wrong person, you are stuck with that person for the next 5 years. And then we'll keep complaining and groaning, when in fact, that pain that we are feeling is self-inflicted. Now, let's look at the role of a civil society then. Because we can't talk about other external factors, let's talk about civil society, what their role should be. Among the roles that the civil society can play, one is to understand the constitutional imperatives. That's the starting point. We should understand that as civil society, there are certain things that are mentioned in the Constitution which we as the citizenry have to abide by and implement. And then two, we have to uphold the constitutional values. If the Constitution tells us that we have a right to vote, but then we also have a responsibility to perform certain duties, then we must do just that. And then, of course, to promote good governance, because there will be no good governance if participatory democracy does not thrive. We need this good governance by making sure that the people that we elect are people who are going to deliver services, and then if they do that, they don't think about themselves, but they think about us as the voters or us as the electorate. And then, of course, we need to understand why it is wrong and not to vote. That is the point I've already mentioned, because then if you don't vote, then it means you are voting for someone else. And then also to detach from a politician. You know, this is the problem. This is a problem because we seem to worship certain individuals, even if they have nothing to offer. And then in some instances, we worship them because we fear them. Truth be told, some politicians are ruthless. If you have a counter view, they see you, they envisage a person as a stone standing on the road that they're driving on. So the only thing you need to do is to remove the stone. That's what they do. Their politicians will become politicians. I wrote in another place last week and I said, there are leaders who became leaders by mistake. They don't deserve to be leaders. They're leaders by default. Some have eliminated a number of people on the way to go to the top. Others have bribed people in the process. Just because I have money, I can buy this table and say, hey guys, can you please vote for me? And then you say, no, why should we vote for you? And then I show you brown envelopes, I don't contain, I'll vote for you. Then I give you the money. So I become a leader by default. The only time people are going to see that I was a leader by mistake is once I'm in office. That is where it is going to show. Mandela once said that there are leaders who make ridiculous statements and say, don't do this, knowing for sure people are going to do it anyway. I once made a statement which offended a number of politicians when former President Zuma appeared in court for the first time. I was coming from East London and I was asked by one of the media houses to come and be with them. As we were driving from the airport to the venue, I passed 7 buses full of ANC people in ANC regarded. And 3 days before, the NEC of the ANC had made a statement, in fact had given a ruling that no ANC member should go and support the former president wearing ANC colors. I said, no man, this is terribly wrong. You don't make such statements. I was even suggesting that what the NEC was supposed to have done was to just keep quiet. And then after people have supported wearing ANC colors, then they should come back and say, no, the comrades were wrong. They were not supposed to have supported former president wearing ANC colors. They could support him as individuals, but not as ANC members. But to make a ruling that don't go there wearing ANC colors, knowing that people are going to do it anyway, what does it do to your image? Because you have failed. We have failed to control the people who are leading. So some of those decisions are reckless. So we detach ourselves from politicians. We don't, in other words, worship politicians, but we must be concerned about things of national importance, either in the immediate or in the country in general. And then, of course, to advocate for societal change. That should be our primary goal. Whenever we vote for a particular individual, it's because we want to effect change in society, not to appease a certain individual, not to make him or her happy, because then if you do that, it means that our mindset is looking at things at a micro level, we forget the macro level stage, that is the bigger picture. And then, of course, to empower local communities to develop new programs to meet their own needs. The primary objective why we vote for X and not for Y is not because we are concerned about that individual or are concerned about that political party. We are concerned about our own needs. We want someone who's going to make sure that there is water, there is electricity, there is this and that. So it's us first and then everyone else later. So the people who are voting for are basically our employees. Unfortunately, our leaders then want to be our bosses, which is an irony. Because if I voted for you, where do you derive power from now to tell me what to do? Because basically, you are my employee, and if I don't want you, then I can vote you out. That is the power that we have in the civil society. Now, towards the end, let's look now at the role of electoral management bodies, which can be found everywhere, and we also have our own here, of course. There is a view that as a new field of study and practice, election management has emerged from the areas of democracy building and democratic consolidation. In other words, these electoral bodies are meant to achieve certain goals. We want to make sure that there is democratic consolidation, and then we need these bodies to make sure that the process happens smoothly. As Mr. Mthong was saying here, that part of the job that is supposed to happen is basically to conduct the election. But in between election, there are certain things that need to happen. So that is why then we need these electoral bodies. Electoral bodies are institutions responsible for managing and administering elections. That one goes without saying, because that's exactly what they do. As Dr. Karuk was saying, this is the job they do, and then they do very well. And between elections, they are tasked to educate and or capacitate society. So in other words, you don't work for an electoral body just because you want to be active during an election. In between election, there are certain things that happen, and then among those things, it is a civic education that is educating society about things that they need to do. Public and private institutions tap into their expertise when running their own elections. Let's say, for example, our tertiary institutions around here want to conduct SRC elections. They will then approach the IEC and then say, can you please assist us? Because they have the requisite skills to make sure that the process goes smoothly, and then there are no issues after the election has been concluded. So that's their job, that's their mandate. And they do it willingly, and I've seen them doing it very well. And then even if you are a church organization, because some people say, no, I'm too religiously inclined, and therefore I cannot get involved in politics. No, it can't be. There is church politics. There is family politics. There is whatever. Wherever you go, you will find politics there. Just like corruption, there are pastors who steal money from the church. It's a fact. They steal money from the church. So it's not only politicians who are corrupt. Some people in church are also corrupt. I once attended a church service where a pastor had a lot of money, which he brought with him to church. And then he was asking us then to make sure that whatever I was having there should be full by the end of the church service. I could foresee there is trouble coming. And then he took this money, 100 notes and then 200 notes, and then he took the money. And then he said, okay, I'm going to throw this money up. Whatever remains up there belongs to God. Whatever comes down here is mine. I said, no. This pastor thinks that he's talking to preschool kids. Some of us can see the game that he's playing, but that was not enough. And then he called his wife. They called them a first lady. A first lady, can you come in? Now I'm going to teach you men how to treat your wives. And then he took a couple of of notes, and then he gave it to his wife. If you are a man, you must give money to your wife. And then he gave money to the wife. Hey, hallelujah, hallelujah. Yeah, this can't be right. Only to find that this money that is showing off with is the money that was paid by church members last week, isn't it? This guy is not working. This is the job that he does. Their pastors are doing a fantastic job. Don't get me wrong, police. Their pastors are doing a fantastic job, but their pastors who have created churches primarily for money. And then he said, okay, now this is what I'm going to do. All those who are at the site, they will start putting money here. We will compete, want to see which group will win. So it's group A and group B. I don't go to church to compete, for God's sake. I know where to go when I want to go. So there are many things that have gone wrong in our society. So the point I'm making here is that whenever you need assistance from these electoral bodies, you shouldn't be worried about the structure that you come from or the institution that you come from. You must be worried about the outcome that you want to achieve. And then these bodies are going to assist you. And then I list some of them that we have. Our IEC here, ZEC, Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, with all its problems, but it is there. And then, of course, you have the Lesotho IEC and so on and so forth. So each country will have its own electoral body for that reason. These institutions ensure good governance by facilitating electoral processes so that elections are free and fair. That is the primary objective. And abide by constitutional imperatives. They assist in improving participatory democracy. That is their job. So they make sure that participatory democracy happens smoothly. In other words, they implement the electoral acts that some of you referred to in the beginning, and they also make sure that they perform their constitutional mandate, because that is what they are said to be doing. Some that make this very valid point, they consider these electoral management bodies as the fourth arm of government. And this is because we have the executive, isn't it? Then we have the legislative, and then we have the judicial. So those are the three arms of government that we have. Then if we have the IEC, then others will say these electoral management bodies constitute the fourth arm of government because they are a necessity. Any country that doesn't have this one, then is deficient. So that is why that is referred to as the fourth arm of government. And then in South Africa, Section 90 spells out what the functions of this particular institution should be. Now, as I conclude, flowing from this discussion, there are a couple of things that we can pull together. One is that civic education is at the core of democratic consolidation and participatory democracy. In other words, you cannot have an electorate that is illiterate, because then it means they're going to make decisions that are questionable. Number two, the form of education, this form of education is not an event, but an ongoing process or a continuous process. In other words, we cannot have civic education today and say our job is done, just take the boxes. It should be a continuous process, and there are many reasons for that. For instance, some of the youngsters who didn't qualify to vote in the 2021 local government election last year will qualify for the 2024 general election. And so in between 2021 and 2024, this civic education is to continue. One, you want to make sure that you give a refresher course to those who have already been educated, but then you also educate the ones that have not voted before, who then will qualify to vote in 2024. And then, of course, for it to be effective, it needs different role players. So this civic education cannot happen if only one stakeholder is active. All stakeholders have to put hands together. In other words, we need all hands on deck so that we are able to achieve that goal. This includes civil society and, of course, these electoral management bodies, because if one is deficient, then something is going to go wrong. Government guides the process through legislation, which is informed by the Constitution. In other words, government cannot ensure that we have participatory democracy. All government does is to come up with legislation, and then, of course, that legislation is informed by the Constitution. As for the rest, it's all of us who are going to make sure that this happens. And to understand low voter turnout, we have to check what has gone wrong in the entire system that we've just been talking about. In other words, which stakeholder has lowered the bar? We've talked about a number of these stakeholders, so if they work together, we are almost guaranteed that we are going to have a vibrant participatory democracy. But then if one of those structures is not doing what is supposed to happen, then obviously we are going to have a problem. And therefore, in the final analysis, failure to vote amounts to the reelection of one's constitutional obligation to consolidate participatory democracy. I said at the beginning that we don't promote participatory democracy out of choice. It's an obligation, a constitutional obligation. So the moment we basically don't do that, that amounts to the reelection of duty. It's as if we are basically outsourcing the power that is given to us by the Constitution, and we're giving it to someone else. In science, they say there is no space that should be left unoccupied. If we think that the space is open, Scientists will tell you, no, that space is not empty. There is air there occupying the space. So which means that if I don't vote, there are people who are going to take my slot and they're going to vote for someone else. So that is basically the essence of what I'm trying to do. Thank you very much.
Okay, if you can occupy that seat in the front, the hot seat as they call it. Actually, Prof, can you join one of the tables? We're going to start off with some group discussions before we surface some of the learnings. So, as Prof has been engaging, specifically around some of the gaps in civic education, some of the discussions that I'm hearing from a lot of different organizations that do election observation in particular, that it's not necessarily, or at least they feel, that it's not necessarily that the civic education that's happening is not enough, at least in the way in which we understand it. At the moment, there's a significant focus on voter education. So the hows of voting. So that you must go and vote, and then when you vote, when you are selecting a specific party, please put the X inside the box, not outside, because then the ballot is spoiled and all of that. So there's all of that education is ongoing, it's happening, and it seems to be relatively effective. But there's a sense that the election day and what happens prior to elections itself, insofar as voter registration and so forth, is not where the work ought to be. So for us as civil society at least, and what I'm getting a sense of is that we need to start educating a bit more about what levels of accountability your vote has the ability to activate for you. What it means if you vote or don't vote for certain political parties. And I think something that but something that I think we need to try and be more insistent on as civil society is to think about talking about civic education outside the lens of just the ruling party, the African National Congress in particular. There's a sense that citizens don't have the ability to imagine a world without the ANC. And I understand, it's a liberation movement. We love it for what happened in the past, and we love the work they did, beautiful work, amazing, getting us to a point where we feel like now we're democratically free. But in terms of us moving forward, there seems to be a lack of imagination about what comes next and what that ought to look like. Of course, the other part of it is political parties, I think Prof also said this, political parties aren't offering us a lot of options. They're not attractive to us, at least insofar as the ways in which they show up to us. So some of the conversation then needs to be about how do we create a citizenry that is active enough, is engaged enough, that they have the ability to start demanding from these different institutions more. Because at the moment, politicians in general are not shaken by citizens. When citizens go and protest, they understand, it's just one of those things. They show up, they sign the memorandum, but there's no real consequences for them not following up, for instance, on some of the work that citizens themselves are asking for as it relates to those memorandums themselves. So for this portion of the program, what I'd like to ask is that at our tables, hopefully we're sitting with people that we don't necessarily know. Youth sector, actually, let me do this. Please stand. Please stand. I'll ask this table to stay, except for these two individuals. Two of you actually, please find a different table. So what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to give you a minute. Please find a table with someone that you think is attractive, with someone that someone when you came into the room, something about them just moved you in a particular way. It might be that you're like, I'm not going to like this person, or that looks interesting, that's a nice t-shirt, that looks like a nice dress, I like your hairstyle, all that sort of stuff. So please find a different table, other than the one with people that you came with. If you end up in a table with people that you came with from the same organization, same but whatever the situation is, please find and sit next to someone that you're not familiar with, that you are trying to meet for the first time. We're going to give you a minute for that. Our colleagues on Zoom, I hope that the constituencies that are serving us in Lazi, as well as in Delani, are looking to do the similar things. So we're trying to serve some learning, some questions from the room insofar as what the COP's presentation was. Please, please guys, all of you, all four of you, please give. Disperse, guys. I'm going to here, guys. Please disperse. You write it up. Guys, find different tables. Can I ask two people to come to this table? Two people go to that table? That's fine. Someone go there. Yes, I mean, don't move chairs. So the amount of chairs that are at the table, that's the amount of people that need to be there. Don't move any chairs. So I fully remember. Alright, so Usizi, Kumalo, Emilazi, but also Umelo Simataba. We hope that you're able to facilitate the next session in a similar vein. We hope that everyone who's based in that space is also engaging fervently based on what Prof had to contribute to. So the question or the conversation I'd like you to have at your tables now is this. One, obviously introduce yourself. Who are you, where are you from, the general stuff. Don't go too deep. We still have another session, but also we have lunch, snacks that we're going to have a bit later that you'll be able to have the ability to converse over. Of course, you can come to room and a number, you can exchange them. Start WhatsApp groups. I'm WhatsApp group, the famous now civil society. I think Ozenje probably has at least 15 and probably close to 30 groups. So what I'd like you to talk about at the table is, based on what you're hearing, first from Prof, what are some of the things that are lingering for you? What questions do you still have that you think you hope by the end of the session are unpacked for you? The second part of the conversation is, based on your understanding, what are some of the gaps as it relates to civic education that you want to be able to plug, or at least that you hope to be able to plug, or that you feel like you would be willing to partner up with in organizations and people in this room in order to be able to fix those gaps? Those are the two questions that I'd like to engage with, of course, after introducing yourselves. So I'm going to give you about 15 minutes for that discussion. In discussing, very important, what's your airtime? So we have a little baby. So what I mean by that is that when you're watching your airtime, please be cautious that some people around the table might not be as confident to speak. So if you overpower them, you're not giving them an opportunity to engage. But also, what's also important about that is that when you're only listening to yourself, or when you're listening to people that are from the same constituency as you, or when you are listening to the same organization that you might come from, you're not really learning as much, or you're not optimizing the learning that could be happening in that space. So I hope that you're able to carry that. Watch your airtime, but also be respectful of the other people around the table. We might disagree, and it's important to disagree, but disagree respectfully. So open, and then we'll start to ask for hands after 15 minutes. Here's what I start. Hey, that kind of
Some of them they employ their
C'est la maquette de tableau.
Ouais.
Comment cadrer
Tout, yeah.
et vous attendez comment ça va faire présentation.
Well, I'm happy that you are finding the discussions rich and enjoyable. What usually happens with these things is that people start off nervous. They don't know whether they should move to a different table, whether they're going to like the people that they get to meet at a different table. And then when you say you must start talking, it's quiet. No one knows who's going to start first. But once we get to the end, no one wants to stop. So we really appreciative of your participation in that regard. So there are 3 tables who would like to volunteer what stood out for them in their discussion. So 1 person per table to maybe tell us a bit about what was the discussion about, what did you talk about most significantly, what are some of the things that were common, what stood out for you in that discussion as well. I think that's what we're going to try and service. We have 1 hand here, 2nd hand here, 3rd hand. Okay, sorted for now. And the third mic. If my team can assist in making sure that the mics are sanitized and everything. COVID is still a thing, even though we're not wearing masks. So someone from my team to make sure that the mics are sanitized. What a cooler as some leo, you got to do the minimum like COVID. Yeah. Basically challenge, I think, in a call. See what's going to think that I'm now going to this. Think what you speak. Wait, which side am I typing it? This side. It's typing. Okay. That's related to civic education. Siswam, introduce yourself and let us know, tell me how was your discussion, what were you mostly engaging around? Also the living mic.
Okay, greetings everyone. I'm from Vibe FM Media House. With my group members, we discussed, I think, so many brilliant points. The first point, someone raised that South African citizens just vote and there's no guidance. Maybe every community should have the committee consist of or made up of all political movements or political parties in it, so that there would be a guidance fairly. Another suggestion is that people think that there must be a procedure or education served to those who will be councillors or leaders before they start working. Because it may happen that we complain about the lack of service delivery, but that's not actually the problem. They lack the knowledge, where to start, how to serve the services, community services. There must be studies before they start. The accessibility, the community thinks that leaders are not accessible. They are not easily found after they are being chosen or voted. They even relocate. They moved. We don't even see them after they are being chosen. We are worried. Some say that they think that it's because they are killed. There are several cases that councillors are being killed, or there will be no killings if they just do what they have promised the community that they would do. Another point is that we should stop shifting blames and pointing each other. what are we doing? As an individual, ask yourself that what you're doing. Stop blaming others, stop blaming councillors, leaders, what are they doing? Just ask yourself, what have you done so far? It's been so long, from 1994, I wasn't even born. 1994, but still, there's no change. There's no change. Yeah, I think you should stop right there.
There's no change, so then we should stop right there. I think that's where the work starts. We recognize that there's no change. We recognize that there's a stagnation along the way. What is the work that we need to start doing in order to enrich the space, to make it more vibrant? So talk about tools. Like I said earlier, politicians don't seem scared enough of us as citizens. It doesn't have to be violent, but it's time. So that they don't do it amongst themselves inside their own party political structures, but it becomes something that's ordinary for us. Do you know, there was a sense, I was having a conversation about how democratic are political parties inside them. There are some that we know, certain leaders will leave only when they like it. Siyabona was even new political parties, but there's also the sense that, at least from what I'm witnessing, inside the recent conference in the African National Congress. So there's a sense that our votes are a true indicator of how democratic a society or an institution is. So democracy isn't just about the ability to elect someone and put someone into that space. How much of an influence are other factors playing in order to push people to vote for certain individuals or vote for certain slates inside those political parties or inside those institutions? That's another part of it that we must look at. That being democratic doesn't mean having the ability only to vote for who you want, but you must also look at what are the push factors that make you vote for that specific individual, and then we can decide based on that weighing of those values. Is it reflective of the type of society that we want to be able to see? Nomzan, from the Black Sash,
good day, colleagues. Our question was directed to IC. Previously, we could all remember that around 1994 and some elections after that, we used to have the voter education that was provided by IC. But then we don't know whether that is still happening, and if it's not happening, why they are no longer conducting such voter education. And the other one is around the election of the state president. Actually, in other countries, we have seen that they are able to vote, the citizens are able to vote for the president directly. But in our country, we haven't seen that. We just want to check whether is that possible in our country to let the citizens vote for the president directly. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, family. First and foremost, I would like to thank the organization for the invitation. Indeed, these channels should be applauded for the sterling work. They continue to in sharpening our characters into bold bold and strong, informing individuals about democracy and how it should be protected and developed at all times. My name is Anele Talan, by the way. There's this narrative that is out there that the youth actually is apolitical. What do I mean by that? That the youth does not want to participate in politics. Yes, leaders always attack us. We are always attacked that we do not want to participate in politics. Is it? That's not the case. Leaders who we view as our source of guidance are the ones who are suppressing us. Because, as it seems that there's a criteria out there that people who are struggle stalwarts should be the ones who should be in those positions. So, what I want to allude to is this narrative is false and is engineered by those we view as our source of guidance. And in order for this country to change, we should be in those positions. Those positions, because in order to soldier to the future has to be young, innovative, and energetic. We can't be saying Wenzeni Zuma, Wenzeni Ramaphosa, Pala Pala Fa, Mr. M. Ankole. When are we saying Wenzeni Uzuma Jr., Wenzeni Ramaphosa Jr.? And that's what we have to improve in. Improving the youth. Political education has to be emphasized. We are studying politics. We are trying very hard to solve our country, but we are yet suppressed, threatened, or promised that we will sign our debt warrants or debt contracts. Is that the case? Do we want our country to move forward? Okay, I'm not there, but let me move forward to the subject matter, which me and my table discussed. What we found interesting is the role of election observers missions is that they should observe the compliance with the electoral code of conduct to ensure free and fair elections, no acts of intimidation, sabotage of posters, and no-go areas leading to the election day. Ensures that voters vote peacefully in voting stations. The IEC accredits election observers. So it should ensure that there is proper counting of voters and there is no cheating. Political parties should not campaign within the parameters of the voting station on voting days, and the IEC should stick to the voting program. It should be a transparent process which advances democracy. That's important. It should advance democracy. We should highlight that. We should advance our democracy. We spoke about youth apathy. Youth apathy. Yes, I think our system is still old. I think our system is still that one of 1994. It's still rusty. We need to change it. And that is where we bring the youth into the party. We need to advance our technology. We need to introduce online voting, and we need to utilize it effectively. By doing so, that will limit political confrontations in voting stations, such as political violence, killings, burning of infrastructure, etc., etc., killing of political leaders, you name it. And the issue of ageism. Why should the youth vote for the older people? Why should we not vote for the younger people? Why should I always vote for Ramaphosa? Why should I always vote for Jacob Zuma? When will I vote for myself, the younger generation? And that is why we are reluctant, and that is why we don't go to those voting stations. because we are voting for the older people. And that is why I'm saying the process is rusty. It is rusty. We need to wake up as a country. Our leaders need to wake up. I'm speaking to those experienced leaders who are still in government. They should create space for the youth to maneuver. What was the other issue was lack of political knowledge. We lack political knowledge, and that should be worked upon to. Retrospective voting, that is also important. Retrospective voting. Why should I vote for you? What have you done for me? What did you do for me? What advantage do you what will you deliver?
Yes. No, it's Kaz.
And that is retrospective voting. And that is what we spoke to. Thank you very much.
In terms of the ways in which we engage with these discussions. So on the one hand, young people ourselves particularly are very militarized, very excited and engaged in the politics. On the other hand, we don't turn up to the polls. But on the other side, we're also quite engaged in the internal party processes. We are very much radicalized to a particular faction or view or way of doing things. But at the same time, the people that we elect into positions of power within those parties are themselves quite old. So we're mobilized for the interests of older people, yet we say we should be the ones leading. So it's difficult sometimes to marry those two dichotomies, especially in relation to young people who belong to youth leagues and youth movements or political parties. So it's important for us to interrogate constantly what that then means for the ways in which we participate in the spaces that we ourselves are provided with. I'd like to check with our colleagues in the land if not, they can WhatsApp me the questions and I'll read them out loud. Prof, if you can engage some of those perspectives that you've all heard for now, and then see Kubera or Seven. If we can also give ourselves a round of applause for that, is also a huge thing. So give yourselves a round of applause. So yes, yes, that one. Please look present in the Parliament.
I'm rising on a point of order. No, thank you very much, colleagues. I think the discussions have been vibrant and the issues raised are very critical. One of the concerns I have, especially on the question directed to the IEC, Dr. Kewana will attest to this. I raised a serious concern when government slashed the budget given to the IEC. That is where the problem is, because no matter how prepared they are to ensure that there is voter education, there is civic education, they just can't make it without the finances. And some people are not happy when I make proposals as to where that money could come from. For instance, reducing the number of deputy ministers, because if the minister is not around, and then we get another minister to do two jobs when we have a deputy minister. But then, of course, politicians will not like that one. The reality of the matter is, the IEC would like to do certain things, but there are constraints that are evident. And then on the issue of electing the president directly, I think that would be a great move. But of course, that would warrant a constitutional amendment for it to happen. It can't just happen overnight. But it's something worth considering, given the fact that the point that I made earlier on about people who become leaders by default is that if you like a political party, and I happen to be number one in that party list, I will therefore eventually be the president or be the mayor or whatever else, without me having the requisite skills to occupy that position. But because I happen to be the correct political party at that particular given moment. So those are some of the issues that I think that we need to consider. Now, the point that was raised by the youth is very critical because, truth be told, government has in fact failed us on this one because they come up with the rule that if you are between 60 and 65, you must retire, but they don't do that. That is where the problem starts. When I was looking at the unemployment rate and looking at the unemployed youth specifically, I was asking myself the question, if we were to apply that particular legislation or that particular rule in Parliament, how many positions would we be able to free up for the youth to take up? So those are some of the discussions that need to happen, and then politicians will assist us on that one. And then as for the youth itself, I get the point that the youth cannot vote for the elderly, but then are we active enough as the youth in our local spaces? Say for example, if you have a BGM, and you are a member of a political party, there is a BGM, you don't attend because it's a given, they are going to elect Peggy to be the representative. Where is your voice? Why don't you go there and make noise, someone else makes noise, and then the numbers will tally. Eventually you'll find that you've displaced one of the elderly candidates, and then you have your own candidate. Because only then will we be able to change the status quo. If we complain and do nothing, the status quo will remain. And in fact, those who are occupying the positions will make sure they protect the space. So I think the point I'm making is, as much as the youth is correct in saying that they are being sidelined, but it is equally correct that they are not active enough. They have a voice. The youth has a voice, by the way. You saw that happening with the hashtag Fees Must Fall. They effected a number of changes. We're now talking about the Africanization, localization, indigenization of the curriculum because of the role that they play. So they can do that. So the youth has the ability. And then also in terms of choosing which political party to vote for, if the youth can apply its mind and not elect a particular person just because the person happens to be too vocal, but then look at the substance of what the person is putting on the table, that is how the youth can effect changes. We have a number of examples from across the continent. I can talk of East Africa, where I happened to do a lot of research and spend some time there. There was a university which was called the Federal University of East Africa. The youth played an important role in changing the face of that institution. Then the political leadership came into the picture and assisted the youth, and then eventually there were changes not only at the university, that is the Federal University of East Africa, but also in the East Africa Commission. That is the first East Africa Commission, which was established in 1967, but then it was disbanded in 1977. The youth played an important role there. So the point I'm making, therefore, is that the youth, in fact, can assist us in some of the concerns that we're having, because the elder people are not going to give up their space easily. Some of them have no fallback position. That is the reality. And that is why some end up killing other people, because they want to retain those positions. So they'll do anything and everything to protect their space. But the youth can use democratic means, including removing those who are incumbents through a vote or through voter education. So I think that all of us have a responsibility, the youth included. In the interest of time, coordinator, I'm going to pause here for a moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Virtually, you can take your seat amongst the group. Of course, we'll get another opportunity to engage both with Prof as well as other speakers as time goes, but we'd like to welcome Umnomzalulu Ngisikelembe, who's going to be representing the Independent Electoral Commission in this discussion. And we want to get to a sense of what's the role then of election management bodies, specifically here in South Africa, as we have such a trusted institution such as the IEC. But given the work that civic education requires, we recognize that we've been able to partner with organizations such as the DDP and others in order to try and be able to bridge the gap. But then how does their work then shift based on the shifting narrative that we have both in the country, but also just generally in Israel, we were having a discussion about the potential for voting with electronically and all of that. But people are saying no, regardless of how we vote, it doesn't necessarily move more people to go to the polls. Some of the examples that were made was some students in some tertiary institutions, for instance, get to vote wherever they are, either with a cell phone or when they have access to a laptop. But it seems that those things are not moving more people to vote. It just means that you have access to vote wherever you might be. So we need to find the drivers that will shift the voting demographic. And of course, but we appreciate both the partnership with the IEC as well as your time, and welcome.